Thanks to all of you for being here. Particularly warm welcome to the new members, the new attendees who are here. You'll learn about how AAPS fights against the war on doctors. There is a war on doctors, and AAPS is the only national medical organization that stands up and fights for the private physician. So that's why we're here. That's why AAPS has existed since 1943. That's why it was founded. We've remained true to that ever since our founding. Our oldest member is sitting in back, I think, Curtis Kane, 93 years old, still sharp as a tack. I'm talking about you, Curtis. Had dinner with him last night, and if you have a few minutes, you could ask Curtis about the war of northern aggression, and he'll tell you about that war too. We're going to be more successful in the war against doctors than there was success against the war of northern aggression. I'm going to talk about going out of network. And out of network is when you don't sign any insurance contracts and you're like a free agent in sports, and that's the analogy I'm going to draw. Now, some of you sitting here will be thinking, I can't do that. I can't do that in my specialty. I can't do that in my situation. And it's easier for some doctors than others. But I want to persuade you, and I hope to persuade you, that for the medical profession to continue to thrive, we do need out-of-network physicians, that out-of-network physicians are helpful to all doctors. I'll draw an analogy to the Second Amendment. We just had a presentation by Bob McQueenie. He's a big firearms enthusiast, and many of us in this room are, but even some of us in this room who don't own guns, we should be thankful that there are private citizens who own guns. So even though gun ownership may not be for a particular individual, we are better off as a country the more private individuals who own guns. There's more freedom that way. There's more of a check and balance against tyranny. And same thing with out-of-network physicians. Their existence, their presence there is what keeps insurance companies from driving down in-network rates. The only check and balance against insurance companies and insurance company control over the practice of medicine is this existence of physicians who are out of network and don't play along with the insurance company's rules. And those out-of-network physicians are a thorn in the side of the insurance companies. And the insurance companies are constantly trying to get legislation to drive out-of-network doctors out of existence. They're constantly suing out-of-network doctors. They're constantly refusing to pay out-of-network doctors. So there's a struggle there between the out-of-network doctors and the insurance companies, and that tension takes some pressure off of the insurance company's control over in-network physicians. The analogy I'm going to draw in my presentation here is to sports, professional sports. I'm not here to promote professional sports. I was a big sports fan growing up, and at some point I saw how much time it was soaking up watching these games and paying attention to stuff. I just got rid of it in my own personal leisure time and said, I'm not making any money off watching these football games, forget it. I'm not watching anymore. And I got out of it before free agency really took over. And I remember when free agency came into professional sports in the late 80s and early 90s, it really picked up. And I thought, even as someone who's a free market person, I thought that this is going to destroy sports. I thought, wait a minute, you know, they better think about what they're doing. I didn't think fans would go to a game. Fans who are making an average of $40,000 a year would go to a baseball game to root for someone who makes $40,000 every time he steps up to the plate. I didn't think that was workable. I thought the fans would abandon the game, but they didn't. And an objective look at professional sports comes to the conclusion, the inescapable conclusion, that free agency in professional sports has been better for everybody. It's been better for the owners, it's been better for the players, it's been better for the fans, it's been better for everybody. And there have been studies of this. The owners resisted free agency. The owners, who are like insurance companies, owners in professional sports play the same role that insurance companies play in the medical profession. Owners can't hit the ball out of the park. They can't score a touchdown with the football. They can't do a slam dunk. They're there to take money from consumers and then funnel some of that money to players while the owners try to keep as much as possible. So they opposed free agency at every turn, and yet free agency was better for them. It made them all billionaires as they own these teams. The value of these sports teams went through the roof. The revenue in professional baseball overall, after the strike in the early 90s, the revenue in 1994 was $1.4 billion. Today, last year, in professional baseball, the overall revenue was $9 billion. Went from $1.4 billion in revenue to $9 billion in just 20 years. The players, of course, make unbelievable amount of money. In fact, baseball players, they say today, are still underpaid. They're still not making as much as they should be, even though they make $30 million a year, many players make, and so on. They're charitable. Charities are better off because many of these players, when they make these prodigious salaries, they then support a lot of charities. Tim Tebow has built a hospital in the Philippines. Clayton Kershaw, the pitcher for the Dodgers, has funded numerous medical missions to Africa. Albert Pujols, the hitter who's now plays for the Angels, he's funded a massive charity, I think for Down syndrome and so on. So charities are better off. More fans watch than before with free agency. When Michael Jordan was making a lot of money as a free agent in I guess that was the 90s, and then he retired, the ratings for NBA basketball games went way down for the finals. And now last night with LeBron James as a free agent who's been jumping from team to team, last night's game one of the finals set a record for the highest ratings for game one of the finals on ABC because he's the star, he's the free agent, he's making a ton of money. Free agency is a good thing. It's the free market. It's something that should be encouraged. And we shouldn't be jealous of the players. The players plow a lot of that money back into charity. Many of them do. We shouldn't be jealous of doctors who are out there out of network charging a lot more than the in-network rates. It's the free market at play, and the alternative is obviously worse for sports and for medicine. The alternative for medicine, if we don't have out-of-network doctors, if everyone were in-network, then Aetna and other insurance companies would just drive those rates down lower and lower and lower. Be like Medicare, right? Medicare is a situation where there is no free agency, and I'll talk about that more a little later towards the end of my presentation, how we need free agency in Medicare. But you don't want insurance companies to have the kind of control that Medicare has, and they will get that control if we don't have out-of-network doctors. Okay, well, insurance companies, they're there to make a profit, right? So they're out there with their public relations arm telling the public how bad these out-of-network doctors are. And many doctors believe the stories and accept the insurance company line that patients should not be charged an out-of-network fee if they go to the emergency room. So we see stories in the newspaper. I believe many of them are supplied to the newspaper by insurance company public relations departments that will have some example where somebody went to the hospital for a broken leg and got their leg taken care of on an emergency basis, and it turns out the orthopedic surgeon was out of network. So the patient, even though the patient had insurance, the patient got a bill for $25,000 from the out-of-network orthopedic surgeon. And that will then get blasted all over the headlines And the insurance companies will cry foul and say something has to be done about this, these greedy doctors, blah, blah, blah. We need to pass laws, we need to be able to sue the doctor, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sure you've seen this in your town. This is going on all around the country, and many people fall for it, obviously. But when you think it through, you think, well, wait a minute. Why doesn't the insurance company pay that bill? And wait a minute. Insurance companies, how much are they paying their executives? And you take a look and you see, well, the CEO for Aetna made more than $36 million in 1 year in compensation. And he's complaining about a $25,000 bill to fix somebody's leg on an emergency basis. If that bill gets knocked down from $25,000 to $2,000 or $800, who's going to pocket that money? The insurance company. That's who's going to profit from that. These bills that out-of-network doctors submit are to be paid by the insurance company. That's who should be paying those bills. They promise coverage for the patients. They got the patient to sign up for their insurance, pay these insurance premiums that can be $10,000 to $20,000 a year, regardless of whether that patient gets any care that year. The patient still has to pay the premium, and the insurance company is collecting that money. They should be paying these out-of-network bills. Now, the insurance company has leverage, just like sports owners, and the insurance company can negotiate with those orthopedic surgeons and offer them better in-network rates and try to persuade them to go in-network. Insurance company has a ton of leverage on their side. Or they can negotiate that bill down and pay it, but they don't want to do that. Instead, they want to force all doctors to accept in-network rates and have the insurance companies set the rates. And we oppose that. That's not going to be that's not the right way to go. It's not going to be a happy ending to that story if insurance companies can set the rates. It'd be like if sports owners could end free agency. And you go back to the 1960s when sports owners were making all the money and players weren't making anything. Star players were making a pittance. I mean, that's not the free market, and that's not good for anyone overall. Well, these bills that have been introduced, you've got some in your packets, and I'll show you one that's being rushed through one of the state legislatures. You look in your packet here, it's A4444 from the Assembly of New Jersey. And the bill was too long, really, to reproduce all of it. So I just copied the first 3 pages here. But you can see some objectionable things just in the preamble to the bill. And one thing I want to alert your attention to that's in the legislation that's being pushed swiftly through the state legislature at the behest of insurance companies. If you look at the 3rd page, it's double-sided, so it's the 2nd page as you go in, and you look at subpart K, it says right here in the legislation, studies confirm that the United States spends significantly more on health care than other countries, but on the whole does not produce better results for patients. That's just flatly wrong. The United States has the best health care in the world. There's no question about that our results are better than any other country. You look at cancer survival rates, it's much better in the United States than any other country. They just stick it in there, and it's part of the fiction to try to limit rates. And so what they had in this bill was they had a provision here that no doctor could charge more than 2.5 times greater than the in-network rate of insurance companies. That means insurance companies will be able to set the fees for doctors. That's what they're pushing for. Well, they had a hearing on this last week, and to the amazement of the committee, the room was packed with people who were objecting to this bill. And they were shocked, I'm sure, because they get feedback from these lobbyists that, yeah, we need to do this, we need to stop these greedy doctors, and the reporters are all in favor of stopping the so-called greedy doctors, but the room was packed with people who testify against this. You can't do this. The people shove says, listen, you lower my rates to in-network rates, I'm out of business. I can't do the charity care I do. You had hospitals come in and say, hey, you let insurance companies knock all our rates down to some in-network rate, we shut down. We close our doors. This bill takes the approach, as other states have done, of setting up a healthcare price index system where you would have some sort of schedule and some sort of index that you would compare doctors' fees against. And in the trial I handled last year, 2 trials actually, for an AAPS member against Aetna, Aetna brought in an expert who testified about her analyzing all these databases, and she said, you look at what doctors charge for this particular procedure, and you look at thousands of doctors, and you crunch the numbers and everything, and this doctor is way above what is the distribution of most doctors and what they charge for this procedure. And Aetna wanted a jury to rule against the doctor because his fees were, according to this testimony, outside of what most doctors charge for that procedure. And I argued against that with the jury, and I was able to prevail. The jury sided with the doctor. And I think that surprised Aetna. I'm sure that surprised Aetna, because they feel that they can smear a doctor and claim that the doctor is somehow overcharging, and they're used to winning with that argument in the press. But you get before a jury and you lay it all out about what Aetna is really doing and what the doctor is really doing, and a jury is going to side with the doctor. I mean, Aetna, at the end of the day, what is Aetna and other insurance companies really doing? They're maximizing their own profits. That's what they're really doing. And when you think about that and you realize that, like sports owners of 30 years ago, they're just going to maximize their own profits, there needs to be some freedom on the side of the service provider, needs to have some ability to set his own fees and do the business as he thinks needs to be done and what he thinks is reasonable. Okay, another approach, and what I've handed out, gets into something we're hearing a lot in the news about, transgender issues and so on, with Bruce and Caitlyn Jenner, the same person. And this approach is a federal law that's just introduced, and it says that there's certain treatments, if a doctor provides it, he's committing fraud. And this federal law here, it's HR 2450, it says if a doctor provides counseling to someone to try to dispel his tendencies to become transgender, then the doctor cannot bill for it at all. So this would prohibit a doctor from charging anything for a particular type of therapy. It's odd, isn't it? Well, the federal government cannot prohibit the therapy, so what they're going to say is, what they're going to try to do is say, we're going to prohibit charging for the therapy, and they're going to prohibit advertising for the therapy. Well, that's pretty scary. When the federal government starts to say that doctors cannot charge for something, that's even worse than price controls, isn't it? That's tyranny. That is tyranny. Okay. Another issue that AAPS has been working on is this maintenance of certification. And I think the sports analogy can help us here a little bit too, where as I watched LeBron James last night, it occurred to me, does LeBron James have to go through maintenance of certification? I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I don't think they checked his papers before they started the game, had the tip-off to see if he had renewed his certification. And if you don't have that in sports, I mean, why do you have that in medicine? I mean, you're professionals, doctors are professionals, you went through medical school, you went through internship, you went through residency, you got your diplomas, you passed all your board exams and stuff. Why do you have to jump through these hoops every 10 years or even with increasing frequency to prove that you're still a doctor? It seems to me it's inconsistent with being a professional. Well, there's money to be made in maintenance of certification, so that's why it's being pushed by some of these specialty groups that are making millions of dollars off of this. And they came up with a bill called the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, which has maintenance of certification in it. So if your state has passed an Interstate Medical Licensure Compact and you go to get a medical license in another state through that compact, you have to have maintenance of certification to do that. And if you let your maintenance of certification lapse, then that may cause a problem with your licensure. So we oppose the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, and we worked hard to block it in what we viewed to be the battleground state for this, which is Texas. And Texas just adjourned its biennial session on June the 1st, and we were able to block passage of the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. So that was a big win. We're going to roll that thing back, and we've got a bit of a grassroots effort here to expose what a scam maintenance of certification is, and we're constantly turning over rocks and learning new revelations, such as money that's flowing from the Federation of State Medical Boards to state medical boards, and that stuff people need to understand what the Federation of State Medical Boards is doing there in throwing money around and inviting members of state medical boards to come down and paid for trips in order to learn about the plans that the Federation of State Medical Boards has for the medical profession, which are not consistent with what's best for a private physician. So AAPS is working hard on that front. Finally, I want to mention Medicare. I mean, Medicare is the ultimate price control in-network system where they prevent doctors from going out of network from Medicare. We did get a bit of an expansion in the opt-out status, such that starting June 17th, if you opt out on that day or later, then it's treated as a permanent opt-out. And you no longer have to re-opt out every 2 years, which has been a huge irritant to all of us. The rule used to be that you could opt out, but then every 2 years you're back in unless you re-opt out. One person compared that to a divorce, of having to renew your divorce every 2 years. But now it's going to be permanent. So now if you file after June 17th for your opt-out, it's a permanent opt-out. And hopefully the private contracts that you then get from your patients will then be recognized permanently. Hopefully you will not have to renew that every 2 years. We don't have any regulations on that, but it would seem consistent with the new statutory scheme that the paperwork should be renewed only every 2 years also. It should not have to be renewed. So in other words, if the opt-out is permanent, then the private contract should be permanent as well with your patients. That's very irritating to physicians, having to renew that private contract wording with their patients every 2 years. We're looking for new legal approaches, and I think one of the matters we'll be discussing tomorrow at our board meeting will be expanding the ability of doctors to treat Medicare patients, expanding opt-out. There is the option of going disenrolled that's getting increasing attention, where it's not an opt-out status, it's a disenrolled status. We'll be looking at ways to do that. Maybe it's time to bring another suit against Medicare. And maybe it's time to raise again the fact that Medicare itself is unconstitutional. It's never been constitutional. They've gotten away with this federal encroachment on the private practice of medicine. When Medicare was passed, it was never supposed to dictate how doctors treat patients, but of course it does. And of course, its billing system does interfere with the practice of medicine, and of course, many doctors have gone to jail unfairly gone to jail over billing disputes and so on, and the federal government never should have gotten involved in this. The practice of medicine has always been within the jurisdiction of the states. And I think the time is ripe again for states to assert their authority. We have more conservative state legislatures. We have states increasingly asserting their authority against the federal government. We have California doing it. We have Colorado doing it. And regardless of how we feel about the marijuana law in Colorado, it is perhaps a healthy thing that Colorado is pushing back against federal authority. And Colorado is saying, federal government, we don't care what your position is on marijuana. We're going to make it legal here. Well, maybe it's time for states to assert their authority over the practice of medicine and push the federal government back. And a way we can do that is with some lawsuits against the interference of the practice of medicine by the Medicare system. So tomorrow at our board meeting, you're all welcome to attend, we're going to be looking at filing a new lawsuit. And what better time could there be than on the 50th anniversary of Medicare for AAPS to file a lawsuit that says Medicare is unconstitutional. Thank you.